In a world overflowing with distractions, we seek meaning. How do we transform ambition into something deeper, into true fulfillment? I'm Sam Pepin, CEO of Course Educa, and I've spent years helping businesses succeed by connecting their goals to something bigger. On the Meaningful Podcast, we explore not just how to win in business, but how to grow as individuals. Through conversation with thought leaders, innovators, and everyday heroes, we uncover the stories that drive us towards something greater. Whether you're striving for success, seeking purpose, or just looking for the next steps in your journey, this podcast is your guide to navigating the intersection of ambition, growth, and meaning. So please join me and our incredible guests as we redefine what's possible in both business and life. Enjoy. Live your faith where you work, because ministry isn't confined to Sunday mornings. Welcome to the Meaningful Podcast. I'm your host, Sam Pepin, and today we're diving into 3 transformative themes: embracing faith in the workplace, building servant leaderships, and living on mission every day. Our guest today is Mike Henry Sr., the founder of Follower of One, a global community for Christians who wants their work to matter and their faith to shine through their everyday lives. With decades of leadership experience across industries like logistics, finance, and tech, Mike brings profound wisdom on integrating faith with professional purpose. His 5-step system empowers believers to serve, lead, and live intentionally in every role, no matter where they sit on the organization chart. If you enjoyed this discussion, please let everyone know with a like, a small review, or a quick share. Your supports help more people find meaningful content just like this. Let's begin. Mr. Mike Henry Sr., welcome on the Meaningful Podcast. How are you doing?
Very good. Thanks for having me, Sam. Thank you very much.
Well, it's lovely to be able to platform you. We actually recently met each other, and what you're doing is quite outstanding. So to kick us off, please tell us more about Follower of One.
So Follower of One is an online community that I began because I wanted to connect with other Christians in the marketplace. It's hard sometimes to be able to meet people who share your faith. And I found it was easier to connect with people who were Christians, but who were business people. It was easier for me to find them online than it was in my local church, for example. And so this way I could start connecting with people who wanted to do something with their faith.
Beautiful. And we'll talk in depth basically of what all of this entitles perhaps. But I want to bring you back to the beginning of that story. One thing I love to do, Mike, specifically with seasoned professional like you, is tell me more about your upbringing, basically your environment when you were growing up. How does that basically shape the person you are today?
Yeah, so I grew up in pretty much middle-class America. My father worked in the trucking business, and I'm the oldest of 3 sons. And I remember my first job in 7th grade. Instead of getting an allowance, my dad used to take me to the truck line to sweep. I would sweep up, and that was my job every Saturday. I was the only kid in 7th grade who punched the time clock and had a checking account, because I would punch the time clock for 4 weeks and they would cut me a check, and he was teaching me how to manage my finances.
Wow.
And so all of my high school and college was working in and around the truck line, except for a couple of years when I tried something else and didn't make as much money. And so most of my time I spent those first years was working in the trucking business. I did some sports and things like that, but I was pretty small as a kid. I grew late, and as a result, we were just pretty much standard middle-class Americans. We would go to church once every other week or so. My mom would have my dad take us to church, but we were never all that committed to it or anything like that. And I didn't have a relationship with Jesus until I was almost 30 years old.
Right, which is another quite interesting thing. So you went the corporate route basically to begin with. Obviously, you spent quite a bit of years in leaderships across diverse industries, logistics, obviously financial services, also that you mentioned quite a bit, and technology most specifically. I'm really wondering, when you're thinking about obviously your time in corporate America and how it was basically, I suppose, what are sort of the big lessons, the key lessons you took from basically your corporate career career, and perhaps how did that influence your leadership philosophy?
Yeah. So that's a great question. I think we all, one time I even made kind of a statement that the opposite of a leader is a victim. We're leaders if we take responsibility and do something. And we're no longer leaders if we just become the victims of what's going on around us. We always have this ability to choose how we respond to every situation. And I think my father raised me as one of those people. He gave me this old name tag, kind of office name tag thing that he had that said, "It can't be done." And the apostrophe and the T had been struck out.
Okay.
And so it really meant it can be done. Figure out how to do what you want to do. That almost anything was possible. Now, we know that everything isn't possible, but I think more things are possible than we tend to think. And so my leadership was leading where I was, doing what I was doing. And working in the trucking business, it was being as good as I could be. Those first few years out of college, even working in the trucking business, and I ended up back at my dad's company. I didn't want to be there, and I was difficult to be around, but I actually came across and built a relationship with Jesus right about the time I turned 30. And that really changed the way that I approached everything at work. Now I realized that I was trying to spend as much of this life with Jesus as I could. And that meant allowing Jesus to invade my work life and transform the way I did things. Instead of looking down my nose at people in the trucking business, I was trying to find a way to lift them up. I'm trying to find a way to bless them and to make a difference in their life. And it changed the way that I did everything. And instead of me being the young jerk who worked at our trucking company, slowly but surely I became somebody who was genuinely interested in everyone and trying to figure out how to integrate my faith into what I was doing every day. I had to work, but I wanted my faith to come with me. I didn't want to just leave my relationship with Jesus out in the car. And so everything about leadership changed for me because now I have a responsibility to make things better in every interaction, in every relationship, in every situation. I adopted a mantra that the universal job description is make your boss successful. And you become a leader when you take the initiative to do that instead of waiting to be told how to do it all the time. And so for me, leadership is just taking responsibility for our circumstances and making them better.
Yeah, I cite Ralph Nader quite often, which is the function of leadership is to produce more leaders rather than followers.
Uh-huh.
And but it's the first time that I heard somebody basically put it, the opposite of leadership is being a victim. It's actually quite powerful. I'll definitely steal that one from you, Mike.
Right ahead.
But no, but it's definitely a great one. And you talk about obviously this sort of this transition. You talk a lot about purpose-driven work, which is obviously super important in your life, and this sort of understanding that I can take my faith with me as I'm getting basically to work. I don't need to be a faithful person at home, and therefore afterwards being kind of this, let's be honest, soulless corporate person at work. And that's very interesting. And I'm wondering if you could tell me, was it sort of a turning point? Was it sort of this aha moment of just now is the time to do that transition? Or was it more of a slow, gradual type of feeling of just, well, there's a little voice in my mind telling me that, hey, I need to incorporate Jesus a bit more here?
It was very slow. Especially at 30, I had lots of bad habits. I had bad habits about complaining about the things that happened. I had bad habits about whining about the things that were going on in the workplace. I still am a classic whiner. I'm one of the greats. But you have to train yourself a little bit to start remembering that your faith transforms the way that you react to things. And so the first challenge that I came across was I would go to church and I felt like I wanted God to put me into ministry. I use air quotes when I say that. No one's seeing this, but I wanted my faith to matter 24 hours a day. And what would happen is that on Thursday, I would realize that I haven't thought about Jesus in like 2 days, and you have to start training yourself to think a little more intentionally. And so one of the ideas that I got was to start praying for the people that I interacted with every day. Kind of surprisingly, our overnight delivery driver, we had FedEx pick up and deliver every day at this company I worked at. It turned out that our regular route driver was a believer. And so he and I started sharing prayer requests. And it was one of the ways that God just started reminding me that I'm not just totally absorbed in my work every day. I can still pray for the people that I work with, because the FedEx guy will be here in a few minutes, and I wonder what his prayer request is for today. And then I can pray for him and that kind of a thing. And so it started out very slow, and it took me so long that it's almost embarrassing to get where I am today. Many of my former employees would probably still be surprised that I'm talking about faith in the workplace after having worked with me some number of years ago.
Yeah, no, it's interesting, and I'm quoting you here because I think it's very interesting. But you said, I wanted more than just a successful career. I wanted my work to make a lasting impact for God.
Yes.
And that's obviously very, very, very thoughtful type of quotes. And it seemed like you got to that realization quite slowly, but just like the divine tells us, there is no good or bad time to turn to faith, to turn to God. Some people, it happens very, 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 very soon in their life. Some people actually very late, much later than 30.
Yeah.
And so there's absolutely no problem. That actually there's only beauty in all of that. I'm wondering, because truly that transition specifically to follower of one, it was sort of an unknown path, right? It was a very mission-driven path, but sort of an unknown path. What was the challenges that basically occur when you decided to make that transition to basically founding followers of one?
The first time I talked to my pastor about what do, I have to go to work. So I know you want me to go to this breakfast or go on this mission trip to another foreign country or something like that, but I can't do that. What can I do? It seemed like all the early answers were that I had to leave work and go back to my church. And I kept saying, this can't possibly be right. There has to be something that I can do every day. I was not happy with the idea that because I had a mortgage and 2 children when I became a Christian, I couldn't just quit my job and go to seminary. So did that mean that I was stuck being a part-time Christian for the rest of my life? People would talk about going into full-time ministry. I'm using the air quotes again. But that meant that I was a part-timer. I didn't want to be a part-time minister. I wanted to be a full-time minister too. How do I do that? And that's actually the key question. The key question is, what can I do? If I would get an idea and it was an idea that I couldn't do, like I needed to go back out to the church and study for some degree or something, I can't do that. I've got to earn a living and pay my bills. What can I do? I came up with 5 habits that I can do any day that put me on mission with Jesus. The first is pray. The second is appreciate people. The third is know what I believe. I have a responsibility to be able to talk about my faith. The fourth thing is serve others. Jesus said that he came to serve, not to be served. And then the fifth thing is when somebody asks me about my faith, I speak for myself. I don't tell them what they have to do. I tell them about my own experiences and why I'm different because of my beliefs. And so those 5 things I felt like I could do no matter what my job was, no matter what situation I was in today. I was still in the freight business. And shipment doesn't get where it's supposed to be. People call you up and chew you out. And so while I'm getting chewed out, I have to remember that I'm a believer and I can still pray for these people and try and do what's best for them. And so I started learning how to live that stuff out every day, focusing on what can I do, not what I can't do.
Right. And that emerged a beautiful mission and vision for Follower of One. And I'm truly wondering, there's especially if for you, like I said, it was quite from a professional standpoint and even a monetary standpoint, was quite an unknown path. When you're thinking about the initial hurdles in launching a platform like this one, tell me more about basically these early days of finding first few people to join the platforms. How are you able to do so? Tell me more about just an odd one of what it was to get basically to market, perhaps.
Yeah, certainly. The first iteration of this happened in 2008 and 2009. I actually formed a community called the Lead Change Group. We were talking more about leadership than about faith. And the technology was very new. We tried using WordPress and BuddyPress, and I stumbled through challenges with all that technology, and I never came up with a great financial model, a way to make that work. But what I realized was I was still meeting Christians from all over the globe who wanted their faith to matter every day.
Mm-hmm.
I ended up giving that whole thing away in 2014. I took a full-time job in 2012 because I couldn't make enough money doing the Lead Change Group. But I kept thinking, from 2012 to 2016, I kept thinking, man, we need to come up with a way to help Christians help one another live their faith. Because when you think about it, my pastor, he really doesn't know a lot about my job. It's not common for pastors to understand a lot of different workplace experiences. Many of them grew up in the church. And so getting us to help each other, I would love to connect us by occupation or by industry, because being a Christian salesperson is different than being a Christian truck driver or Christian computer programmer. And so if we could connect by occupation, that would be great. And so in 2016, I attended a Faith at Work conference. I found a Faith at Work summit that I went to in 2016 just to see if anybody else was doing what I was thinking about trying to connect believers. And most of that whole conference was academic people. It was mostly from Christian colleges. There were a few business people and even fewer pastors. And I realized that no one was doing it. And so I came home from that conference and created a GoFundMe account and asked my friends to chip in some money and help me get a 501c3 started, a nonprofit started. And the whole plan has been from the beginning for Follower of One to be totally donor supported. We want to give away what we do and help people live out their faith daily. And so we actually launched in October of 27. Well, we launched in June of 2017. And then in October of 2017, we got approved for our 501c3. Our nonprofit status got approved. And 3 weeks after that, the company that I work for eliminated my position. I was no longer welcome there. And so I started doing some contract work. What had happened that we kind of skipped is, in the middle of my career, I changed from the freight business from logistics to technology. I taught myself somehow to program computers. And so I learned to use technology in the workplace, and using technology helped me get out of the trucking business. And that's how I ended up in financial services and in telecom. And so I spent those last 20 years of my career in the technology business. And so I spent the first 3 years of my Follower of One career doing part-time contract work for people in the software development space while I was working on Follower of One. And then about 3 years ago, I started working on Follower of One full time.
There's so many questions from sort of that transitions. The one thing that I have in mind, and mind you, obviously I still live and I grew up in Quebec, which is now by a secular society by legislations. And the interesting thing is that there seem to be some challenges and so I suppose a faith-based resistance in the workplace. I'll go as far as saying that, and obviously you experience it yourself. And which is they're not all workspaces welcome faith discussions and perhaps welcome basically the fact that you embrace actually any God or any prophets for that matters. And you talk a lot about your insights on navigating obviously these challenges without conflict. It's something you talk a lot about. I would love if you can tell me and express some strategies to professionally basically address this opposition with grace and wisdom.
Yeah, I'm happy to. I think it all begins with prayer. When we begin just simply by praying for the people that we will see today. I joke about how we talk about going on the mission field. All I have to do is say, okay, Jesus, here I am. What do you want me to do today? And I'm on the mission field. Now, the first probably 20 years when I asked Jesus, what do you want me to do today? The only answer I got was do a good job. So we have to do our job very well. When we start trying to do our job very well, we start praying for the people that are around us, our coworkers, we might find a way to do something that makes life easier for one of our coworkers.
Yes.
All right. We're trying to make things better for everyone. And after a while, ideally, the Lord is guiding me to do my job in such a way to where it kind of surprises the people who are around me. And the goal of what our 5 daily habits even is to help people live and work in such a way where their friends go, why are you doing this? Because even in a place where they will not allow you to talk about your faith, once somebody asks you that question, why are you doing this? Then I have to tell them, well, I'm doing it because of my faith. I know you really don't want to hear about my faith, but you know, if you will give me a permission, I'll tell you a little bit more about it. And if you don't want to know, then that's great. But it's my relationship with Jesus that makes me want to live this way. And now all of a sudden, the fact that I'm operating according to a different set of standards becomes my coworkers' kind of challenge. They're having to figure out how to reconcile that in their brain. It's not my problem. It's theirs.
Sure. And have you seen this? Obviously, you have a few decades on me, which is fantastic. I value experience very highly. When you're thinking about that, for example, what was a typical workspace? Let's just pick 1980s for this example compared to what it is today. Have you seen this becoming increasingly more of a challenge? Perhaps this sort of a understanding that faith must be awake or in some workspace completely, basically banned from the workspace altogether. Has that been a sentiment that's been increasing over the years in your perhaps perspective and your, I suppose, versions of the modern world?
Yeah, I think it has. It just, it's also kind of regional. I live in Tulsa, Oklahoma. There's a lot of people here who think they're Christians, and Christian conversation is a lot more generally accepted here than it is in Quebec or on the coasts.
Sure.
But I really think that in every situation, our job is to help people discover that we are different because we follow a different leader. We're following Christ. And so, another thing I've learned is, I've got this from someone, I forget exactly where, people remember what they discover. They don't remember what they're told. And so I want to help them discover the fact that I'm different, not me telling them I'm different. My job is to very quietly just ask God. He starts giving me great ideas. One of my previous companies, there was a place in our business where I didn't have access as an employee. I didn't have access to that area, but I had to go in there frequently. And so what I did was I actually learned the ladies who worked in that area, I learned all their favorite milkshake flavors, and I used to go get Sonic milkshakes. There was a Sonic restaurant not far from our office, and I would get Sonic milkshakes in the flavor of the people that I thought were working back there and give them the Sonic milkshakes just to kind of make it easy for them to want to open the door for me and want to help me do my job. that kind of a thing. Never
Sure.
really talked about my faith about it. I never turned any of it in on an expense report or anything like that. I was just trying to make a difference. Every other coworker they have wasn't buying milkshakes. And so this was giving them something to think about. And people would ask, why are you doing this? And then I could say, well, I'm doing it because I'm a Jesus follower. I thought you could use some help having a good day at work today. It's hard to have a good day at work when somebody buys you a milkshake.
Right. No, it's in those subtle, obviously, ways of showing appreciation is so important, right?
Mm-hmm.
There was Francis Alesi saying that you should preach the gospel at all time, if necessary, use words, meaning that you don't need to speak it. Sometimes it's just about a small gesture, like again, buying a milkshake. That's actually pretty good. It's pretty quirky, and but it's true, and I think that those are so important in and out of the workspace. Sometimes and I'll go as far as saying that some of the dearest and most, I suppose, faithful people that I know are very, very subtle with their faiths. Sometimes the opposite. People that are a bit too wordy and too expressive about it are actually the one you should be careful about. But that's another conversation. Now that obviously there's not extroverted, incredible Christians, but be aware that those things can be navigated quite subtly. And
Exactly.
you don't always need to scream to actually you never need to scream to be a rightful follower of Jesus.
Exactly.
I want to come back to follow up one, because one thing that you do is those marketplace mission trips, which you actually told me a little bit about it in my first call with you. But I'm really wondering, obviously, how those marketplace mission trip works, and how share a little bit of the stories of transformation from the participant, because it seemed like it's truly making a difference.
Yeah. A number of years ago, I attended a church, and the pastor really liked to travel overseas himself and train missionaries. And it used to frustrate me a little bit, because I was sitting in his church congregation every week, and my question to him was, what do you say to a missionary that's different than what you say to me? He always would say, I like training missionaries. Like, I don't like preaching in church on Sunday. I want to go overseas and train these missionaries who live on the front lines. And I said, but I'm supposed to be a missionary. Why would you tell me something different than you would tell them? One day, he and I were having lunch, and he was trying to get me to go. The church had planned a mission trip to Mexico, and he was trying to get me to sign up to go on that mission trip. And I couldn't go. I had too much work stuff going on. And he even said, when people go on a mission trip, that's when they get it. And he used the air quotes, I think, that day. And I said, well, I think I get it. And I drive 30 miles a day to work. How is that not a mission trip? And he and I have actually talked about this since then. We don't remember if I actually said that or if I just thought it. But I told people that story for a long time, and I was complaining. I told you I was a good whiner. I was complaining about how the church didn't understand the way my brain was thinking about this. And one day in 2018, after I'd already started Follower of One, a young friend that I was talking to said, well, why don't you do a virtual mission trip? And I was just blown away at that idea. And so we don't even call it virtual mission trip. It's a real mission trip. We challenge people to go to their own job for 2 weeks. The first week, they study those 5 daily habits that we talked about: pray, appreciate others, know what you believe, serve others, and speak for yourself. So each day, it's just a devotional on that with a couple of suggestions about how to start praying for people that you work with. Then the second week, we act like we're on the field. I'm using my air quotes again because nobody can see that. But we act like we're on the mission field. We call that Action Week. And the second week, all the devotionals are more action-oriented. And we have Zoom calls every evening to talk about what happened in our workplace today, because we were all staying in some hotel in some foreign country, ministering to local people. We would get together in the evenings and talk about what happened today and pray for one another. And so we do that, but we do it on Zoom. And so you go to your workplace, I go to my workplace, but then tonight at 7:00 or whatever, we get on a call and talk about what happened. And so we've done now 49 of these 2-week exercises with about 1,200 people. most of the feedback that we only get feedback from about 18% of the people that do it. But of all the feedback that we get, almost all of it is positive, and almost everyone checks a box on our feedback form saying that they want to keep their mission trip going. That's our goal, is to help people realize that we're all always on a mission trip. The first prayer we talk about is, "Here I am, send me." Those 5 words are the distance between anyone and the mission field. And so once you say those 5 words, say, "Okay, Jesus, here I am. What do you want me to do today?" The rest of this is his problem, and he will put you to work.
Mm-hmm.
And so I'm blessed because we now have the technology. We use a software package called Mighty Networks, and we can actually run multiples of these trips at the same time. And we do them with churches. We partner with churches, or we do them ourselves. And my dream is to have 1,000 or more churches who do a marketplace mission trip every week to get the rest of their congregation to actually go onto the mission field. And once everybody realizes that we spend 7 days a week on the mission field, every one of us, once we realize that, it will change the way we do everything.
Beautiful. Yeah, it reminds me of a quote by Gandhi, actually, which is the best way to find yourself is to basically define. Yeah, the best way to find yourself is to lose yourself in the service of others. Pardon me.
Mm-hmm.
And it's obviously one of the great thinkers of our modern times. But it's to me personally, as I embrace faith more and more, and I stumbled upon faith basically when I was about 17. So quite late in my current journey, right? As I'm standing here at 20, but it's very interesting to see sort of this whole movement now, and it's getting trendy to talk about it, which is I want to be very careful about that. Everything that comes a trend, unfortunately, seem to be to slow down and burn from what I can see. So It's just truly, obviously, speak from the heart here. When you're thinking about this, how the world is, in my opinion, I will use the word reshift, but feel free to correct me with another word if you prefer. But this sort of reshift towards faith, towards basically what makes us North Americans. I'll put both Canada and America actually together. This Judeo-Christians type of virtues that were embraced, and that we actually build the constitutions of both countries on. Do you not only do you see that reshift, but if you do, how are you experiencing it? Because you went from a very, very deeply Christian world when you were growing up to a modern world in which we're shifting to a circular basically self, and now sort of this reborn of basically this traditional way perhaps of viewing the world. How do you see yourself basically, and how do you feel about all of that?
Well, I feel grateful in some regard because I'm not a rule follower. And churches that are based on rules that you follow, that doesn't work for me. I love the fact that I get to have a relationship with Jesus. And my relationship with Jesus causes me to live in such a way to where I see him working in people's lives. And when I see that result that he brings about, then I experience joy, because I got to be a part of it. The joy is natural. The hope that I have is natural because of my relationship with Jesus. It's not about following the rules or any of those things. It's more about trying to be creatively intentional in my relationship with Jesus and listening to him and doing what he says. This all began with a kind of one foundational assumption that I make is Jesus is actively working in the life of every person that we know, even people that don't want anything to do with him. Jesus is working in their lives. And so all I'm trying to do is align my behavior with what he's doing so that he can take advantage of that. And for me, I see it shifting, but I think we're all universally turning from the rules a little bit more. The internet kind of accelerated some of that because now we get to make our own reality a lot easier. You and I didn't have to buy a TV camera or do anything like that, right? We subscribe to a service and we can have a podcast recording. and it's really high quality stuff.
Yes.
Right? You can, if you have a free WordPress website, you're a publisher. And I think the internet has helped make it more individual. And that's what Christ operates in, an individual relationship anyway. It's not about how many times I go to the building or how many different things I say or what rules I follow. It's about, am I following Jesus, the person Jesus?
Right.
And so I think that's where it's unique and genuine. And that's part of the reason why I think our 5 daily habits kind of help people. Instead of thinking that Christianity is something I have to stop doing something else to do, right? I don't have to stop work to be a Christian. I don't have to stop anything to be living out my faith with Jesus. I can do that in any workplace, in any life situation. And then I get to experience the joy of knowing that he's putting me to work in the lives of people.
Yeah, you're talking about this emergence of new media, right? This sort of this new reality that you can create now, certainly simpler than ever. I wouldn't say simply, but definitely simpler than ever, without a shadow of a doubt. You do obviously a lot of these new type of media for your impact. Obviously, you write, you speak, you do obviously a lot of podcasting like this one, and you seem to be very actively pursuing basically those diverse medium to be able to, I suppose, share the words of wisdom to as many people as possible. I'm very much wondering what led you to be able to perhaps have a very, very perhaps versatile sort of vision when it comes down to the pillars that you're using for communications, and what led you down that path of just how you can use that to spread your mission in the first place?
That's a great question. So, I spent a lot of my time when I was younger trying not to mess up.
Mm-hmm.
And it would always irritate me because I would spend a lot of energy trying not to mess up, and I would still mess up anyway. And then I realized that there's one mess up, there's one screw up that I want to avoid. I don't totally avoid it, but the mistake that I want to avoid is the mistake of inactivity. I'd rather try something and screw up than screw up not trying.
Right.
And so I joke about wanting to get my screw ups out of the way early every day because it reminds me that I don't die from them and I can screw up again tomorrow. And I also love the fact that Jesus claims to be sovereign. He claims to know everything and to be in charge of everything. And if he chose me to do something and I screwed up, that must be baked in. My error must be factored in. If he'd have wanted somebody good, he'd had to got somebody else. And so that gives me new energy to screw up again tomorrow. And Jesus uses that. We're all some degree broken. The Bible says we've all sinned and fallen short of the glory of God. I'm nothing but a poster child for the fact that you get in free. And so I get to enjoy my relationship with him today and chase hard after him. And my mistakes become his problem.
Right.
I have to make them right. If I make the mistake of offending someone or doing something wrong or insensitive, I want to be as transparent as possible, apologize for that, and make it right as quickly as I can. I'm still trying to do the right things, but I'm not going to let the fear of failure keep me from trying.
Beautiful. How did you build such resilience in your mindset, you think? You were talking about the fact that you grow within your faith, but you also grew into this sort of mentality of what I call failing forward, which I'm a big fan of, which you shouldn't, obviously the only failure is actually to quit. Anything else is not failure. Was that always something that you embraced? Tell me more about sort of your journey to resilience and I suppose mental strength.
Yeah. One of the things I catch myself saying every now and again is how much I hate making the same mistakes.
Right.
And there's some mistakes that are kind of built into me that I make over and over and over again. One of those is I say that I'm against the mistake of inactivity, and yet I'm not very physically fit at all. I overeat and I'm lazier than I want to be. I can come up with 900 reasons not to exercise. Part of me just doesn't, I'm this consistent underperformer in that area of my life. I'm grateful. I'm grateful that God still uses me, that I don't get disqualified, that simply saying, here I am, Jesus, puts me back in the game. And that Jesus can use broken me. He uses all of us, broken as we are, to glorify himself and to help other people know him. And that's what I want to do, is I want to lay up all the treasure I can by helping other people get to know Jesus firsthand.
Right.
And so that's, part of me is just being ornery. I got some of this from my father. My dad was like that too. He used to actually joke. One of his jokes was, "Don't get mad, get even." And he would always say, "Don't just get even because you were even when you started. Get even." Well, I don't want to do that, but I want to do the best I can in response to every circumstance. And so that's, I think, the biblical way of doing that, is trying to figure out a way to do the best I can according to my relationship with Jesus. And so it gives me great energy and excitement to try. Sometimes I get very discouraged by it, but it's, I love living that way. I get great joy living that way. And it's genuine when I'm telling people about it, because that's the way I feel. So I love the excitement of working for the guy who I'm confident will win. Jesus wins is what the Bible claims. And so all I'm doing is making sure, that I'm doing what he asked me to do.
Right. There was this extraordinary interview by Tucker Carlson that interviewed Nayib Bukele last year. One of my favorite videos of the whole year. And wonderful gentleman, president of El Salvador, for those that are not familiar with him. And they talk at length about how he was successfully able to get obviously the murder capital of the world into the safest country in the Western Hemisphere, which is nothing short of extraordinary. And he was talking about his plan. And the first thing he said was seeking God's advice. And alongside that, he said, you know what I and I'm quoting him here, you know what I saw, Tucker, what I learned is that when you win the spiritual war, that helps you win the physical war. And that is something that I think we completely lost with it, basically in North America, this understanding that actually for not only your mental strength, but also for your own well-being, becoming the stronger version of yourself, which will be a resilient, loving self, is also all encompassed within these visions of embracing Jesus and embracing basically spirituality as a whole, and doing so in a way in which is encompassing not only yourself, but your loved ones, your neighbors, the people you don't even know, and the whole world at large. And I can feel this, and again, I don't have as much context as you are because of my age, but I can feel this momentum now. People talking about it without shame. People coming out very, very strongly. We saw that at the Super Bowl multiple times nowadays. Basically, the first thing they say is what? Well, praise God. I praise God for who I am, where I am, and I'm grateful towards that. And I think that's nothing short of extraordinary. I'm wondering, how does that make you feel personally as someone that embraced faith a little bit? You said later on in life, it was actually quite young, if you actually ask me. But how does that make you feel that we see basically these sort of high performers, people in high, obviously the people we count on to inspire and leads us to actually come back to this traditional way of viewing it?
So I'm excited to know anybody who's relating to Jesus as they do what they do. I think that's the great challenge that we all have is that for the longest time, our religions forced us to do things differently instead of teaching us how to follow Jesus as we did what we did. And so we have to go to this service, or we have to attend this thing, or we have to abstain from that activity, those types of problems. And so I think that's part of the message is what it actually goes. There's a couple of passages in the scripture. One of them's in the book of Colossians 3:17. It says, whatever you do, do all for the glory of God. That whatever we do, we can do it for his glory. And so when I realized that just meant like me treating him as my boss. Okay, boss, what do you want me to do today? Look at your calendar, Mike. Go take good care of people and get to work. Yes, sir. That's what I'll do. I get to do the things that I have to do every day, but now I'm doing them for the Lord. And so I get excited when I see other people doing what they do for the Lord. What's cool is that he created all these different jobs and all these different things for us to do. We haven't exhausted that yet. It isn't like that podcaster is the last occupation left. We can't think of anymore. Right? We keep coming up with new things. God has created this way for us to follow him doing all these different things, and it points people to him, and we get to play. I love that I get to play in what he's doing.
Yeah, you talk at length, and you share a lot about this faith-driven leaderships. You were talking about even the transformation of Follow of One, and the fact that it was more leadership basically than truly Christ-based at first. So leadership was what a core component of who you are and what you do. And truly, I think it's Mark 10:43, but don't quote me on it. I think it was whoever wants to be leaders amongst us must also be a servant. And it's one that I always keep in mind because I'm a huge believer in stages of life, or perhaps season of life, like Jim Rohn was calling it. And there's a fluidity in life where there's at one place you might be the leader, for example, of your household, for example, and then you might go to another places like Surge, and then you're not a leader. All right, the leader is obviously Jesus and Christ himself and God. So there's this fluidity in life in which allows you to be a servant, to be a leader, and therefore I think it keeps us very humble. I don't believe that being a leader 100% of the time is actually very good for your ego. Actually, I think it's quite destructive. So it's always reminding us about being not just how important it is to be a servant for others, but how serving others is important for you specifically. I'm very much wondering, when you're thinking about this faith-based leaderships, what are the most effective tips? You mentioned your 5 basically step system, but outside of that, do you have any other insights concerning people in which wants to get into what it is to be a faith-based leader? Any insight and sort of actionable items that they can do to better themselves?
Yeah. So the whole concept of, we have to kind of be a little careful. The idea of, so I won't juxtapose, I won't put servant opposite leader.
Oh, no.
Right. Part of the reason why I put victim as opposite leader is because I choose to serve. Right. And it's that choice of serving, because that's what Jesus chose. Jesus, it says in Philippians, Jesus laid down all of his rights as God and took the form of a flesh, and then became a baby, and suffered and submitted himself to his parents and all these things. He submitted himself to all these things. That was an act of leadership. And yet Jesus said himself, even the Son of Man, even I didn't come to be served. I came to serve and to give my life. And so that's where we get this story that it's putting other people first is a leadership activity.
Right, exactly.
Right. And so now I can submit to someone else. The whole name, and even the name Follower of One, I don't know if I told you this. We had a conversation back in that leadership group that I was in, and we were talking about the definition of a leader, and I had talked about my version, and somebody else said, well, a leader is just someone who has followers. And I said, no, I don't believe I've ever followed anyone. I don't want to follow anybody. But after I got off that call, the Holy Spirit kind of elbowed me, and he said, well, there is this one guy you follow or your life doesn't work. And that's where the whole idea of follower of one came from.
I love it.
And so when I serve people that I work with, or when I serve customers, or when I serve my family members, I'm doing that as a follower of Jesus. And that's that kind of what keeps everything right. I can give away money. I can do things that no one would expect. I can buy a milkshake. And, it becomes Jesus's problem, because that's what I think he wanted me to do, to bless somebody. And so, okay, boss, I'm doing what you tell me to do. To me, that's the most fun thing about our faith is that we choose to lead by serving other people. We don't have to say a word. Jesus then fills in all the gaps. He's the one who makes it process in their brain, and he's working out his goals and everything that's going on in the world through us because we're obeying him.
One thing that I want to philosophize about with you, Mike, and perhaps you might say that we did that a few times here, but we'll do it again, is one thing that I always come back to mind, and something I wouldn't say worry. Worried is not a right word, but perhaps I have some contempt towards. I'll go as far as saying that, and I also have some I suppose questioning when it comes down to the modern world. Is very much this understanding of marriage and family. We live in a world now where it depends on where you look at, but 5 to 6 marriage ends in divorce. Both of our birth rates in Canada and US are below the replacement rates. So we live in this world now where, unfortunately, and I think again there's this shift, which I'm very positive, and I'm an internal optimist. All right, so I will keep smiling, but there was this I believe huge trend to destroy what was basically the traditional Western culture, and we see that reflecting in the stats actually without any much debate at all. When you're thinking about how to keep, and I know that you're obviously married now for a very long time, is that right?
Yes.
How many years?
Almost 42 years.
That's what I thought. So that's fantastic. Congratulations, first of all. But when you're thinking about,
my wife did that.
Yes, congratulations to you too, for sure. When you're thinking about what is the main principle to keeping marriage and relationships strong, and obviously amid work and ministry and all the stress of modern life, tell me more about how we can basically embrace not only the youth, but all people, to not only realize the value of what is marriage and what it means, but also to embrace it and flourish what is the only thing in which will contribute to human flourishing, which is obviously procreations. Just tell me more and speak a little bit of your mind about how you were able to do so and what you believe basically is necessary for others to also being able to embrace such a lifestyle.
Yeah. So one thing I should point out, because I have friends and I talk to my friends about marriage and family relationships and things like that. And I always tell them that if you're taking advice from me, you have a problem, because I'm not qualified. Really, the truest reason why I've been married for 42 years is that my wife didn't give up. And, I'm out of my league talking about this, except that it's all based on what we trust God for.
Yes.
And so the first 5 years of our marriage, I was not a believer, but she was. I tell people she was a born-again Christian. She was a real believer. I was a born-in-America Christian. I was born in America. I wasn't Jewish, and I hadn't killed anybody. And so I thought I was a Christian. Right. And the first 5 years of our marriage, the thing that I learned about our faith, and I learned it without my wife ever preaching a sermon or anything like that, but I learned that her hope was more secure than mine, because my hope was based on my circumstances, and her hope was based on her relationship to Jesus. And so my wife is type 1 diabetic. She has a chronic illness, but she had more hope about the future than I did, even though she had the chronic illness, because her hope was anchored to Jesus, not to the circumstances, not to how good she felt or how bad she felt that day or anything like that.
Wow.
And that's part of what confused me to the point to where I paid attention in church enough and finally learned about salvation being by grace alone. And so it's this commitment to Jesus that gets us through our circumstances. And I think in our marriage situations, unfortunately, it requires both people to be fully committed to the Lord. And so if your partner is not fully committed, then it's still got a real problem. Mm-hmm. You can be fully committed, and that doesn't necessarily fix everything. And that's why I'm not qualified really to speak about anything other than the complication of this. But you do the best you can. There's actually a book that I recommend to many of my male friends, and it's an older book. It's called Discovering the Mind of a Woman by a guy named Ken Nair. It's not a very well-known book. It's very hard to read. I joke with most men that you really want to throw it after about chapter 4, because he goes all the way back to the creation account, and he talks about how because we were created first, it's our responsibility to lay down our lives and to take the initiative to give ourselves away for our marriage. And it's an amazing book, and I have friends who have read it, and it's been successful in helping them keep their marriage together. I have other friends who have read it, and they've gotten divorced. And so,
wow,
it definitely makes you think differently about your role as the man and as the initiator in the relationship and as the leader. We've been called to submit to one another. I submit to my wife by the way I live, but I also take the initiative to do the things necessary to make my wife not have to do that. I not have to be in charge all the time. And you're going to tell, the more I talk about this, the greater the likelihood I'm going to say something really foolish, because I'm not qualified. But all I know is that I hang on to the fact that I'm trying to do what's right, and I'm asking the Lord to forgive me, and I'm asking my wife to forgive me on a regular basis.
That's No, and that type of vulnerability is so important for not only respect to grow, but for love to grow. Mother Teresa actually very famously says that a family that prays together is a family that stays together. And and I think it's very interesting to see your journey also through navigating sort of your own. It's very interesting because and I have I don't have a wife yet, but I do have a girlfriend, and life is completely different when you need to live and work in harmony with another human being. It's a very complex thing. I'll go as far as even basically myself, which run multiple businesses and so on, much harder to keep another human beings happy. That's not even close. So it's a work in progress. And when you share basically obviously values and that foundations, it's obviously a much easier place to be and to operate with it. So I think that's those are words of wisdom, Mike. So I really appreciate it, and I really want to end our conversation with sort of the vision and the future of obviously Follower of One. We've been having this incredible conversation about all sorts of topics, but when you're thinking about the long-term vision for this company and sort of basically obviously expanding it and encouraging more professional to see the value and the work of what it is to be in mission field. Tell me more about how you see it unfold and how can people get involved?
So people can get involved by going to followerone.org and joining our online community, signing up or asking for an invitation to the next Marketplace mission trip. My dream is that I will come out of that organization. I'm old enough now to be qualified for retirement, even though I'm never going to retire. I will choose to do less if I get a choice. But for the next 6 or 7 years, my goal is to get this organization to where it doesn't need me, and that it is a community of people who are encouraging others to live their faith every day. And the Marketplace mission trips and even the online community itself, those are just tools that we happen to use now. I hope to kind of break down the divide between lay people and clergy people. or between sacred and secular, because neither of those things are true. Each of us is a minister. Each of us is operating either according to our own will or according to God's will. And if we're trying to operate according to God's will, I think he gives us a lot of slack. Otherwise, Jesus wouldn't have had to die. And so therefore, let's do what we can. We each are powerful enough to do what God would have for us to do. And my dream is that one day there will be thousands of churches who have had members of their congregation go on marketplace mission trips and realize that they can pray for the people they work with, and Jesus will use them. And to me, that's the coolest thing, is that would be a funded nonprofit, and that people can take part in what we're doing and give whatever they feel like it's worth or what they can to help somebody else do it.
Beautiful. Mr. Mike Henry Sr., it was an absolute pleasure to have you on a Meaningful Podcast. And thank you for being so vulnerable and so open about your journey and sort of the navigation of what it is to be faithful. And I would really appreciate if you could share some last words of wisdom with our audience.
Well, yeah, my last word of wisdom would be, let's believe God so much that it scares us, and then see what he does. I believe that there's more of God than we can imagine, and I don't want to come up short, and so I hope other people that we're believing for what he would have us do, and living that way. So thank you for having me, Sam. This has been a blessing. You're a great interviewer, and I'm excited. I'm fascinated how quickly this time has flown, and I'm excited. I hope that we're all living out our faith. And if you don't have a faith in Christ, if you'd like to know more about any of this, people can reach me, Mike at followerofone.org, or reach me through the Follower of One community. My goal is to help each one of us experience a relationship with Jesus and then live that out every day. And so thanks for having me.
Thank you for spending your time with us today on the Meaningful Podcast. If you enjoyed this episode, please leave a review or share it with someone who could benefit from it. And always remember, your story matters. Make it meaningful. We hope to see you next time.